Hello everyone, my name is Holy Knight Clown, and I am back with a new and very special video about The Last of Us Part 2, or more specifically, the multiplayer portion of it. The gameplay you're watching right now is some Uncharted 4 beta gameplay that I just laying around, but about halfway through it'll switch to some Factions gameplay, which suits the topic a little bit better. This is one of the hardest videos that I have ever made. I've been trying to make this video ever since the trailer dropped over a month ago. I seriously have. I made multiple scripts that took different approaches, and I was even thinking about scrapping the video altogether and converting one of the scripts into something I could post on the forums. When I wasn't writing a script, I was thinking about the topic and how I should approach it, and every day I seemed to lean to a different angle. I cannot explain why I had so much trouble making this video. Maybe I was just overthinking it, but I really want this video to accurately represent how I and a huge portion of the community feels, so I didn't want to mess it up. I really hope that someone at Naughty Dog is watching this with an open mind and is ready to seriously consider what I have to say, because it could save them from another wave of community disappointment with Factions 2 like the one they got from Uncharted 4. I'm actually going to use a lot of examples from Uncharted 4 because it's their latest multiplayer which shows the direction they are taking, and I expect there will be many elements from it in Factions 2. In this video, I'm basically going to be giving you my opinion on how Factions 2 should be made. I'm also going to point out some of the flaws in their previous games and tell them why they were such big problems and how they should be avoided in their future projects. That being said, I am not a game developer, and I know that I should be not trying to tell them how to do their job, so I'm sorry if it comes across that way. I'm just a passionate gamer with an opinion that I feel is worth listening to because I also share it with a lot of other people that I've spoken with. My first point is about balancing, which is one of the biggest problems that people had with Uncharted 4 and Factions. Before I get into this juicy topic, I made a definition of what gameplay balancing means to me, and it may help you understand my point of view. It goes, if the tactic, weapon, or upgrade has an inequality between deemed skill, performance, and in some cases cost or accessibility that leads to an unfair advantage or disadvantage with perspective to the common majority in the same class or comparison, then it is considered unbalanced. Now, balancing can be a very complicated thing to fix in a game, but Naughty Dog just seems to mess it up in the most blatantly obvious ways. For example, in Uncharted 4, the top 3 things that people hated about the game was the blindfire, mysticals, and sidekicks. You know why? Because not only were they unbalanced in terms of skill to performance by a little bit, they were almost completely separate. This is the absolute worst thing you can have with any multiplayer gameplay element with something as effective as those. It takes almost zero skill to use blindfire, sidekicks, and mysticals to their highest potential and to great effect, which is incredibly frustrating for anyone that was actually trying to get good at the game legitimately. In the case of Factions, it got so bad that people just seemed to stop trying altogether. I mean, what's the point in using the hunting rifle for headshots when for far less skill, therefore time and energy, you can just combo body shots with a revolver? Now, I don't blame people that are legitimately new to the game and need to use these things to just barely survive. Trust me, I know how frustrating it can be to get into a brand new game. The problems come up when these people start to like these things so much that are already on the level of almost everything else, that they feel absolutely no need to move past them to different weapons that may offer higher end performance, but at the price of actual skill. Instead, they try to actually master and basically live by the very tactics and weapons. Just play a public match of Factions, and I can almost guarantee that there will be at least a few high-level players using at least multiple of the deemed exploits and are basing their entire playstyle around it. Trust me, as shameful as I am about it, I am talking from experience, and if you go back and watch my very old videos, you will find me using all of the nasty shit. For that reason, I don't blame people for being compelled to use them. The efficiency and performance that these things provide makes them very tempting to use, but nonetheless, I do discourage it. Some would argue that at least some of these things cost a lot, but it's basically irrelevant. In most cases, cost has very little weight when it comes to balancing. Do you think people care that the tactical shotgun was expensive to the point where they didn't use it? No, because it's still a medium-range shotgun that downs in 2 shots, is as easy to aim as a shorty, and shoots as fast as a revolver. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm still happy that it was expensive, but there shouldn't have been so much weight on that fact for the overall balancing. However, sometimes things are just beyond balancing and are pretty much never going to work no matter what you do. The Frontier Rifle is a good example of this because it really has no place in the game. I mean, people define it as a hunting rifle that you don't need to get headshots with and has a higher rate of fire. It just makes no sense why Naughty Dog would think that it would be a healthy addition to the game. Just the concept of it is ridiculous, not to mention the fact that it's extremely unbalanced when paired with a revolver. It's one of the most frustrating and rage-inducing weapons in factions, and it should have never in a million years got a buff like it did. For cases like that, Naughty Dog really needs to be prepared just to give up and discard things that are just not going to work. They need to stop adding things to the game for the sake of big DLC drops. It really feels like the most unnecessary weapons in a multiplayer are released as DLC. There should actually only be a few guns, and each one should be unique and relatively unchallenged for the playstyle that it is intended for. It's obvious that this concept was completely thrown out the window when they were designing Uncharted 4, because the amount of stupid and unnecessary weapons in that game is insane. My second point is to really highlight the fact that Naughty Dog is in a very unique position with their multiplayer, as it is mostly overlooked by a vast majority of people that buy their games. Most people get them just to play the single player maybe only a few times, and then that's it. Even if they heard the multiplayer was actually really good, there would still be a lot of people that would find the idea of extensively playing a multiplayer for a single player game unappealing. I mean, just look at the numbers. Only about 15% of the 8.7 million people that bought the game have touched the multiplayer, and it really shows. The game feels dead most of the time, and sometimes it feels like I'm searching for players longer than I'm actually playing the game. However, despite this, there is still a very dedicated fanbase for Naughty Dog games. These people, like myself, are dedicated to playing their games for long periods of time and appreciate putting time and energy into getting good at them. This is a player base that Naughty Dog needs to focus on. They need to stop worrying about trying to make a game that appeals to a large casual demographic that will still hardly play the game, if at all, and will most likely never buy their DLC. They need to work on making a game that focuses on the skill of the individual. It needs to be an actual challenge to play, and by being so, very enjoyable and rewarding to be good at. It needs to be tactical and teamwork orientated like the original, and the underlying tone of it needs to be, if you suck, then you're going to suck, and if you're good, then you're going to be good. You may be thinking that this is a pretty limited player base that would actually value a game for the reasons I just listed, but it's actually not when you think about it. It's the same player base that games like Rainbow Six Siege, Dark Souls, or even Destiny marketed to, or at least parts of themselves to, and by no means are these small games. They basically need to stop making their games easy and unbalanced for casual players and need to instead encourage and help them become dedicated players without pissing off the existing skilled players in the process. I'm going to get more into this concept further in the video. Now, my third point, which is a moment you've all been waiting for, my wish list for Factions 2. It's probably going to come at no surprise that I just want it to be basically the same as the original, but with very careful balancing of weapons and perks. It's actually a very simple concept, so simple that it almost sounds lazy, but it's seriously the best thing Naughty Dog could do for Factions and its diehard community. They really need to understand that more is not better, and overdoing things like they did with Uncharted would be a huge mistake. They need to use the original game as a sort of base, and if they are going to improve upon or add some key gameplay elements, I just hope they are careful. However, one gameplay change I would like to see would be more interactive environment and terrain variation in maps. However, besides that, the core mechanics of the game, like the movement, weapon mechanics, controls, and pacing, are almost perfect, and a Naughty Dog would be almost insulting themselves if they changed these things too profoundly. However, they could definitely improve upon things like overall graphics, customization, game modes, private match options, community features, matchmaking, and lag and connection issues. The only problem with this idea of a game would be the amount of effort it would take and the struggle that a new player would have to go through before they got to any decent point where their skills were high enough to essentially play and have fun. I mean, the game wouldn't really be that much harder than the original Factions, but there wouldn't be all the exploitable things like covert and powerful shotguns, which noobs usually turn to. The learning curve would be very steep and unforgiving, which would probably discourage a lot of people that just don't have the time and patience to learn such an intense game. This does worry me a bit because new and fresh players are incredibly important for the survival of any multiplayer. This is why there needs to be steps in place to help new players learn the game quickly and provide a fun and rewarding experience as their skills develop. Things like gameplay and video tutorials and weapons like the full auto, which take very little skill to use but offer very low performance and are really just there for beginners. Maybe even preset loadouts with unique weapons and perks that can only be used for their first few games. However, the absolute best thing that Naughty Dog could add to help new players is a co-op or survival mode of some kind. Co-op is the absolute best way for beginners to learn the controls, game mechanics, layout of the maps, teamwork strategies, and aiming in a non-competitive and mostly stress-free environment. Would also add as something to play if you've had a few bad games on multiplayer and want to burn off some steam or dust off some rust. Before, when people got mad at factions, they would just get off, and after doing this enough times, they would just stop coming back. But maybe co-op could act as a sort of alternative that would keep their interest in the game. Co-op is seriously one of the most important things that they could add for Factions 2. Also, a side feature that would be amazing would be to have the option to delete the single player without deleting the multiplayer. I mean, I love your single players and all, but I'm only going to play it a few times, and then after that, it's just going to sit there and take up 50 gigabytes. For people that buy their games digitally, this is a huge issue because every last gigabyte out of the 500 to 1,000 you are provided with is precious, especially when you consider how big games are these days. I know that the downloads can be standalone, because it gives you the option of downloading one or the other first. The big reason that people might actually stop playing the game is because it's just not worth keeping for the almost 60 gigabytes of space that it takes up. And that's about it, guys. I'm incredibly excited to see what Naughty Dog comes up with for Factions 2, and even if it is disappointing, I will learn to like it and play it until their next game. If someone from Naughty Dog is watching this, then I thank you so much, and I wish you the very best. Although some of my rantings may have sounded like I'm just bashing your games, it's really not my intention. I hope I've made it clear that I'm a huge fan of you and I only want you to succeed. Comment down below on what you would like to see in Factions 2, and don't forget to rate and subscribe. I might make another video that goes into more depth about what I want to see in Factions 2, as I feel I didn't really get into the details much in this video. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.